A rare pink diamond discovered in Burkina Faso ignites an international crisis. France claims colonial rights, but President Ibrahim Traoré refuses to surrender. His next move could change Africa forever. The night sky over Gorma province was pitch black, silent, almost deceptively peaceful. At precisely 2 in the morning, distant headlights flickered through the desert haze. A small convoy, 3 rugged vehicles with no license plates or identifying marks, moved cautiously, deliberately, toward a restricted military zone on a nearby hilltop. Corporal Issa Diallo squinted through his binoculars, suspicion tightening his chest. The convoy wasn't scheduled, and no civilian vehicle was ever allowed this close to the newly declared security perimeter. Issa's instinct told him immediately something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, he raised the alert. Radios crackled to life. A specialized patrol moved swiftly, quietly encircling the convoy from both sides. Soldiers emerged from the shadows, rifles raised calm but uncompromising. Within minutes, the convoy had halted. Inside the lead vehicle, strangers stared defiantly forward, silently challenging the soldiers' authority. They spoke no local languages, only terse, crisp French. The soldiers quickly discovered advanced surveillance equipment, samples of freshly extracted rocks, and most tellingly, a detailed map. On it, clearly marked, was a single location, the unannounced, tightly guarded pink diamond deposit, the exact coordinates known only to Burkina Faso's highest government officials, hundreds of miles away, in Ouagadougou. President Ibrahim Traoré received the coded call. His expression hardened as he absorbed the report. He knew exactly what it meant. Burkina Faso's sovereignty was no longer being tested merely by diplomacy, but by stealth, by shadows, by a power determined to reclaim lost control. The battle he long anticipated had begun. 3 weeks before the mysterious convoy incident, under a scorching midday sun, a team of young engineers stood silently staring at a dazzling, rose-colored gem held carefully between their fingers. They were trained in South Africa, but none had seen anything remotely like this, a rare pink diamond, hidden deep within Gorma's ancient honeycomb rocks. They exchanged tense, meaningful glances, fully aware that what they held wasn't merely a stone, but possibly the future of Burkina Faso itself. That same evening, President Ibrahim Traoré stood alone in his office. The secure report laid neatly before him. His heartbeat quickened as he read each word, feeling the immense weight of history pressing down upon his shoulders. He understood, clearer than ever, the fierce challenge that would inevitably arise. Wealth was never left alone, especially wealth in Africa. He didn't hesitate. Swiftly, decisively, Traoré ordered absolute secrecy, quietly setting up an elite military perimeter around the discovery. Every sample was to be secured, every file removed from networks accessible by outsiders. Ibrahim Traoré wasn't naive. He knew the real test would soon come, not from within, but from abroad, cloaked in diplomatic statements and old colonial treaties. He also knew this wasn't just about diamonds. It was about dignity, about self-determination, about finally claiming full independence from shadows of a colonial past. As he turned away from the report, Ibrahim's resolve hardened into certainty. If this was to become a fight, then it would be fought not for diamonds, but for the soul and sovereignty of his nation. Less than 2 weeks after Burkina Faso secured the site, President Ibrahim Traoré woke to urgent calls flooding his office. News was breaking rapidly across global media. France had publicly declared ownership over the newly discovered diamond mine in Gorma, citing a colonial-era treaty from 1897. Ibrahim stared at the headlines scrolling across international channels, his jaw tightening in silent fury. Historical French mining rights reaffirmed in West Africa, one headline boldly proclaimed. Another announced bluntly, Burkina Faso's pink diamond discovery legally belongs to France. Across the nation, people felt a raw indignation, an immediate sense of betrayal and humiliation. For generations, Burkina Faso had lived beneath the shadows of colonial powers. Now, an outdated piece of paper signed before their grandparents were even born was being used as a weapon to reclaim their future. Ibrahim called his advisors urgently, instructing them to respond swiftly but carefully. He knew the implications. Any misstep would be framed as reckless defiance. Any sign of weakness would invite more intrusion. He released a single, concise statement. Burkina Faso recognizes no treaty that chains us to a colonial past we did not choose. Our resources belong to our people past, present, and future. But even as he delivered these words, Ibrahim felt the weight of reality pressing down. The conflict had escalated overnight from quiet suspicion to open confrontation. France had made their move. Now, it was his turn. And he knew he couldn't afford to lose. Within hours of France's provocative declaration, detailed images of an aged, brittle document from 1897 flooded international media platforms. The parchment, inked in fading letters, outlined eternal rights granted to a colonial mining company, rights now supposedly inherited by modern-day France. President Ibrahim Traoré sat quietly in his conference room, eyes fixed on the image projected before him. The lines drawn over a century ago seemed to mock him. To Paris, it was merely historical legality. To him and every citizen of Burkina Faso, it represented chains of subjugation that had never fully disappeared. Anger rippled silently around the table. Advisors, experienced politicians, military generals all struggled to contain their fury. Ibrahim raised a steady hand, quieting the room. He understood their anger intimately, yet knew that rage alone would not win this fight. International news began painting Burkina Faso as defiant, unwilling to respect international law. Ibrahim, eyes narrowed with determination, calmly directed his advisors, "We will not fight their narrative directly. We will instead speak our own truth clearly. History is on our side. Colonial contracts can never outweigh the sovereignty of a people." He knew this battle was not just about minerals beneath the ground. It was about identity, dignity, and control of destiny. France's archaic maps had drawn lines through their lands. Ibrahim's responsibility was now to redraw the future, reclaiming the nation's honor and independence, line by deliberate line. This, he resolved silently, would be the last shadow from the past to darken his people's horizon. Days after France's controversial announcement, Burkina Faso awoke to a silent economic storm. Overnight, the nation's currency, the West African CFA franc, began an inexplicable freefall. Markets trembled, prices surged, uncertainty gripped the streets of Ouagadougou. President Ibrahim Traoré studied reports flooding his desk accounts, frozen without explanation in distant European banks, abrupt halts to foreign investments previously committed, critical shipments delayed mysteriously at international ports. The pattern was undeniable, calculated, deliberate. In boardrooms and homes alike, whispers of anxiety spread. The people sensed the external pressure, yet no enemy had declared war outright. Ibrahim, deeply disturbed but resolute, recognized the tactic immediately economic warfare masked as coincidence, calmly, decisively. He instructed his team to stabilize essential services fuel, food, medicine, but privately. He was angered by the hidden cruelty of this assault. It wasn't guns or soldiers he faced now, but cold manipulation of markets, currencies, and confidence. He knew this was not random, nor was it subtle. This was a message from powerful interests abroad: yield control, or suffer quietly. But Ibrahim had no intention of yielding. His people's dignity was not negotiable. The silent war had begun, and surrender was never an option. As Burkina Faso struggled to steady its shaken economy, a parallel assault emerged quietly in international media. Overnight, reputable news outlets shifted narratives subtly yet significantly. Headlines no longer spoke of sovereignty or justice. Instead, they portrayed Ibrahim Traoré's government as unpredictable, defiant, even dangerously radical. Reports suggested Burkina Faso was deliberately escalating tensions, casting doubts on the nation's ability to responsibly manage its newly discovered resources. Opinion pieces asked provocative questions. Could Burkina Faso become unstable? Was Ibrahim Traoré a leader or a troublemaker inside the presidential palace? Ibrahim analyzed these distorted portrayals. Aware of their corrosive power, he recognized this calculated framing, crafted to isolate Burkina Faso diplomatically and weaken public support internationally. Yet Ibrahim refused to be baited into public outrage. Instead, he carefully directed his advisors, "We will answer with calmness, clarity, and undeniable facts. They seek chaos. We will offer truth. He understood the purpose behind this carefully engineered media campaign, undermining confidence, creating doubt, and justifying external interference. It was warfare fought without bullets, yet equally destructive. Ibrahim's resolve strengthened. He would not bend. Burkina Faso's narrative belonged only to its people, not to distant voices attempting to rewrite their story. As Burkina Faso grappled with economic turmoil and media manipulation, the investigation into the unmarked convoy at Gourma intensified. Specialists analyzed the seized equipment, high-end surveillance technology, soil samples, meticulously labeled and documented in French. President Ibrahim Traoré stood silently, observing the collected evidence spread across a table before him. His jaw clenched tightly as he examined photographs, maps, and notes clearly detailing geological data known only to Burkina's most trusted officials. The convoy's operators remained uncooperative, refusing to disclose their affiliations, yet the clues were unmistakable. These weren't ordinary civilians. They were trained professionals, deployed secretly, deliberately, into sovereign territory. Ibrahim recognized the gravity of the situation immediately. This wasn't espionage, it was intimidation. It was a message from hidden forces testing Burkina Faso's strength, resolve, and capability to protect its own future. He instructed his security team firmly, keep them detained, but treat them respectfully. We'll reveal the truth at the right moment, not before. Ibrahim knew patience was crucial. Whoever had dispatched these vehicles anticipated panic or recklessness. Instead, they would find resolve, clarity, and unshakable determination. The convoy had exposed the hidden depths of the battle unfolding. Ibrahim now clearly saw the scale of the conflict ahead, and he was ready. As President Ibrahim Traoré deepened his investigation into the intercepted convoy, startling reports began to surface from neighboring African nations. Niger, Mali, Chad each reported recent, unexplained intrusions near significant mineral deposits, all bearing unsettling similarities to the incident at Gourma. Quiet conversations unfolded in closed rooms, revealing a pattern too deliberate to be coincidence. Small groups of foreign civilian specialists, always discreet and unannounced, had appeared across resource-rich zones. Everywhere they went, surveillance equipment and geological samples were left behind. President Traoré reviewed intelligence briefings late into the night, feeling an unsettling chill. The scale was broader, the stakes higher than he'd imagined. This wasn't merely about a single diamond mine in Burkina Faso, it was an orchestrated strategy targeting multiple African nations simultaneously. His advisors suggested caution, urging diplomacy and quiet negotiations. Ibrahim nodded patiently but remained firm. Diplomacy would follow, but first, truth must be revealed. He knew clearly now Burkina Faso wasn't facing isolated aggression, but rather part of a larger, carefully calculated plan to reassert foreign influence over Africa's resources. It was an old story, now repeating itself with alarming precision. Sitting back, Ibrahim's resolve hardened. The conflict at Gourma had become more than personal, it was continental. He was no longer defending just a single nation's pride or wealth. He was fighting to prevent a cycle of exploitation from repeating itself, determined to halt history's harmful echoes once and for all, late at night. President Ibrahim Traoré studied documents meticulously compiled by his intelligence team. Spread across his desk were records dating back decades, contracts, treaties, and mining licenses granted during colonial rule. Each bore disturbing similarities, obscure clauses, indefinite timeframes, and provisions cleverly designed to evade scrutiny. Ibrahim felt a surge of anger as he absorbed the full implications. These documents weren't mere historical relics, they were still quietly influencing decisions in foreign courts, binding African nations to hidden obligations. Behind the benign language of contracts lurked an invisible power structure, unaccountable yet astonishingly influential. His advisors watched him quietly, sensing his frustration. The room was heavy with tension, each person understanding the weight of what they'd uncovered. These ancient agreements, never ratified by independent African governments, were still used today as legal weapons to claim resources across the continent. Ibrahim's voice was low, firm, unyielding. This ends now. We must expose these documents publicly. Africa's sovereignty cannot be chained forever to outdated colonial agreements. Wow. He knew this decision would provoke powerful backlash. Yet Ibrahim also recognized the deeper truth. This wasn't merely about reclaiming resources. It was about dismantling a shadowy system that continued to exploit Africa's future. Steeling himself, Ibrahim Traoré resolved firmly he would challenge this hidden power openly, transparently, and without fear. The continent was watching closely, and Ibrahim knew the stakes clearly. This was a battle for Africa's right to self-determination, and he was determined to win it, understanding the depth of the hidden threat. President Ibrahim Traoré chose to act decisively, but silently. Rather than publicly confronting the foreign intrusions immediately, he discreetly fortified security around Gorma. Military units quietly strengthened their patrols, tightening surveillance to prevent further breaches. In parallel, Ibrahim ordered all geological data and sensitive intelligence to be encrypted and secured offline. Communications shifted to secure channels. The nation's digital footprints vanished almost overnight, leaving foreign analysts puzzled. Foreign powers closely monitoring Burkina Faso expected loud protests and fiery rhetoric. Instead, Ibrahim gave them disciplined silence. No announcements, no press releases, just quiet, purposeful action, calculated to protect national interests. His advisors grew uneasy, questioning whether silence risked misunderstanding internationally. But Ibrahim understood clearly silence was strength, not weakness. It bought him crucial time to consolidate allies and formulate a strategic response. Late at night, sitting alone in his office, Ibrahim reflected on the heavy burden he carried. He was not simply defending a mine or economic assets. He was defending the right of his nation and perhaps many others to determine their own future. This quiet, unyielding shield would soon become a powerful weapon in a fight that was only just beginning. President Ibrahim Traoré stood quietly in the secured briefing room, surrounded by large maps displayed on illuminated screens. Each map marked mineral-rich areas across Africa, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Chad highlighted precisely, accompanied by faded notes written in colonial-era French. These maps, recently unearthed by intelligence analysts, exposed a deeply entrenched system of resource control dating back over a century. Ibrahim stared grimly at the stark visual evidence. The lines drawn long ago on these documents still dictated ownership claims in international courts today, silently perpetuating colonial dominance over African resources. The maps were clear minerals, diamonds, gold, each resource meticulously marked as foreign property, locked by contracts Africans never agreed to. Around him, his advisors observed in tense silence, the atmosphere charged with disbelief and simmering anger. These documents, hidden for generations, revealed that Africa's independence remained compromised not by visible armies, but through the quiet tyranny of legal manipulation. With measured calm, Ibrahim finally spoke. These maps must be shown openly. Our people, our neighbors, the entire world, they must understand this silent control. We've been fighting shadows. Now, we fight openly. He recognized the risk he was about to take. Publicly revealing these maps would provoke powerful interests, inviting fierce retaliation. But Ibrahim's decision was firm truth. Even uncomfortable truth was Africa's strongest defense. Stepping closer to the screens, Ibrahim Traoré prepared himself. He was ready to expose the hidden system, knowing clearly this revelation would ignite not just anger, but meaningful change. In the days following the map revelations, President Ibrahim Traoré and his intelligence team unearthed another disturbing connection. A single multinational corporation, with deep historical ties to French colonial rule, was quietly linked to recent resource intrusions across the continent. Originally established during colonial times, it had since merged into a larger European conglomerate, maintaining a carefully concealed grip on Africa's mineral wealth. Ibrahim scrutinized the detailed reports meticulously, his fingers pressing into the table as he absorbed the facts. This wasn't just government action, this was corporate strategy, masked by layers of legal jargon and protected by international trade agreements. The corporation claimed legitimacy, citing inherited historical rights to Africa's wealth. His advisors exchanged wary glances. The threat was clear. Multinational corporations, backed by powerful political allies, were manipulating old colonial treaties to exert economic influence no longer through overt force, but through sophisticated legal maneuvers and economic coercion. Ibrahim's voice resonated with unshakable resolve. Expose them clearly, completely. Our people must see who truly holds the strings. No corporation will decide Africa's future behind closed doors. He knew that lifting the corporate veil would provoke powerful adversaries, but Ibrahim understood the cost of silence. This was not merely about reclaiming resources, it was about reclaiming control over the continent's destiny. Standing firm, Ibrahim Traoré prepared to confront this hidden power head-on, determined that Africa's future would be written by Africans, not by boardrooms overseas. A leaked audio recording arrived anonymously at President Ibrahim Traoré's office late in the evening. Alone, he listened carefully to the muffled voice of a senior French diplomat speaking candidly during a private meeting. "We don't need to retake territories. All we need are the paper's legal documents to prove ownership. Africa's minerals will always belong to those who hold the contracts." Cité, Ibrahim's blood chilled at the diplomat's casual tone. This wasn't mere arrogance. It was a calculated strategy. Sovereignty and self-determination meant nothing to these unseen players, who confidently assumed that legality, carefully constructed centuries ago, would guarantee perpetual control. His advisors, stunned by the revelation, awaited Ibrahim's response. He took a deep breath, voice resolute yet steady. "This recording will speak louder than we ever could. Let the world hear it. Let our people know precisely who claims their future." He knew releasing this evidence would shake international perception, forcing hidden powers into the spotlight. The illusion of neutrality would crumble, but Ibrahim saw clearly the necessity of this step. The battle wasn't about diamonds or gold. It was about exposing and dismantling a legal system designed to keep Africa silently trapped in the past. In the wake of Burkina Faso's historic nationalization, President Ibrahim Traoré moved swiftly to strengthen regional solidarity. He reached out privately to leaders across Africa, Mali, Niger, Congo, South Africa, sharing the alarming evidence and calling for unity. Within days, African leaders quietly converged in Ouagadougou behind closed doors. Ibrahim passionately articulated a vision, clear and uncompromising. "For decades, we've faced exploitation disguised as legality. Alone, we can be silenced. Together, our voices become impossible to ignore." Inspired by Ibrahim's determination, the gathered leaders committed to forming the African Resource Alliance, a united front dedicated to protecting African sovereignty, resources, and dignity. News of the alliance rapidly spread worldwide. International observers reacted with alarm and skepticism, branding Ibrahim's move radical, even dangerous. Yet across the continent, citizens welcomed this development enthusiastically, viewing it as a historic reclaiming of their collective future. For Ibrahim, this alliance was more than diplomacy, it was a personal promise fulfilled. His advisors watched proudly as he stood resolute, quietly reshaping the political landscape. This coalition signaled to powerful global interests that Africa's resources were no longer available on old colonial terms. Late at night, reflecting quietly, Ibrahim understood the alliance would provoke powerful opposition, but he felt an unshakable confidence. For the first time in generations, African nations stood united, speaking clearly with a single, formidable voice. This unity was not merely symbolic, it was transformative. And Ibrahim knew, beyond doubt, this was the beginning of something far greater than any one nation. The international media erupted following the formation of the African Resource Alliance. Headlines starkly divided. Some praised Ibrahim Traoré as a visionary leader reminiscent of Thomas Sankara, courageously defending Africa's dignity. Others painted him as reckless, accusing him of destabilizing the region and risking economic chaos. In newsrooms from Paris to New York, commentators debated passionately. Analysts warned that Ibrahim's bold actions could lead to severe financial isolation for Burkina Faso. Yet, on African streets, the public sentiment remained overwhelmingly supportive. Ibrahim became a symbol of resilience, hope, and defiance against a persistent colonial legacy. Within the presidential palace, Ibrahim quietly monitored these divided narratives, fully aware of their implications. He knew external forces hoped to fracture public support, to isolate Burkina Faso diplomatically and economically. Yet he trusted deeply in the clarity of his message and the unity it had inspired. Speaking privately to his closest advisors, Ibrahim stated firmly, "Let them debate. The truth remains unchanged. Our sovereignty is non-negotiable." He understood clearly the global division only underscored the profound significance of his actions. Ibrahim had ignited a critical conversation, one that demanded the world recognize Africa's right to self-determination. Months after the global controversy erupted, the pink diamond mine at Gourma remained untouched. President Ibrahim Traoré deliberately delayed extraction, despite intense pressure from both supporters and critics, from his office window. Ibrahim gazed thoughtfully toward the distant horizon. Advisors had urged swift development, arguing that revenue was desperately needed to stabilize the nation. Yet Ibrahim saw deeper meaning in patience, clarity and restraint. He knew the untouched diamond mine symbolized more than wealth or potential prosperity. It represented his nation's renewed dignity, its autonomy from external control, and the profound importance of choice. To exploit the diamond hastily would compromise everything his people had struggled to achieve. "We must show the world," Ibrahim quietly explained to his advisors, "that this is not about wealth, but about our right to decide when, how, and if our resources are used." Across Burkina Faso, citizens understood and supported his reasoning. The untouched mine became a powerful national symbol, a testament to independence, resilience, and strength of principle for Ibrahim. This silence spoke louder than any speech. By leaving the diamonds untouched, he had made clear to the world Burkina Faso's future would no longer be dictated by outside interests, but shaped decisively by its own people. Following Burkina Faso's bold stance, a quiet yet profound shift began rippling across Africa. Inspired by Ibrahim Traoré's courage, nations once hesitant began meticulously reviewing old colonial contracts and mining agreements previously considered untouchable in Mali, Niger, Chad, and even faraway South Africa. Governments formed specialized committees, scrutinizing every line of historical agreements quietly, without international fanfare. Outdated colonial-era terms were renegotiated or canceled entirely. The global press scarcely noticed these changes at first, focused instead on louder headlines elsewhere. But beneath the surface, a transformation was unmistakably underway. Sovereignty was quietly reclaiming its place across Africa. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim closely followed these developments, pride evident in his eyes. He understood his actions had sparked something irreversible, a continental awakening impossible to silence. "Our battle was not just about Burkina Faso," Ibrahim reminded his closest advisors calmly. "It was always about setting an example, opening the door for others." The quiet revolution continued, unseen but unstoppable. Ibrahim knew clearly his legacy would not be defined by the diamond mine at Gourma alone, but by the deeper, more lasting change rippling across Africa, a continent steadily reclaiming control over its own destiny. In the quiet solitude of his office, President Ibrahim Traoré reflected deeply on the events that had unfolded. Outside, the streets of Ouagadougou bustled with renewed optimism. People walked taller, voices stronger, proudly embracing their nation's regained dignity. For Ibrahim, the true value of the Gourma diamond was never in its market price or global prestige. Its genuine worth lay in the unity, strength, and resilience it had awakened within his people. He spoke softly, almost to himself, knowing the words would guide him forward. "The greatest diamond we possess isn't buried beneath our soil. It's embedded deeply within our people. Their spirit, dignity, and pride are the treasures we must always protect." Across Burkina Faso and beyond, Ibrahim's actions resonated profoundly. The nation had weathered pressure, manipulation, and hidden threats, emerging stronger, wiser, and undeniably sovereign. International headlines gradually moved on, yet the impact of Ibrahim's leadership endured. Future generations across Africa would grow up hearing stories not of the mine itself, but of how one leader courageously stood firm, refusing to compromise his nation's dignity and independence. For Ibrahim, that legacy was priceless, far brighter, more enduring, and infinitely more valuable than any diamond could ever be. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of personal growth and empowerment.